Most people think the first thing they should learn about money is investing. I used to think that too. Learn stocks. Learn compound interest. Learn retirement accounts. Learn how millionaires build wealth. And yes, those things matter. But if I could go back in time and teach my younger self just one lesson about money, it wouldn't be investing. It wouldn't be budgeting. It wouldn't even be saving. It would be this: money amplifies behavior. That single idea would have saved me years of mistakes. Because when we're young, we often believe money itself is the solution. We think, if I made more money, everything would be fine. If I got a raise, my problems would disappear. If I earned 6 figures, I'd finally feel secure. But life has a funny way of teaching difficult lessons. Because eventually, many people make more money. And surprisingly, their problems remain. Maybe different problems. But problems nonetheless. That's because money doesn't automatically create discipline. Money doesn't automatically create wisdom. Money doesn't automatically create financial freedom. Money simply amplifies the habits that already exist. If you're responsible with a small amount of money, more money usually helps. If you're careless with a small amount of money, more money often makes the situation worse. I wish I understood that earlier. Because for years, I focused almost entirely on income. I thought financial success was about earning more. And while earning more certainly helped, it didn't solve the underlying problem. The underlying problem was behavior. The way I spent. The way I planned. The way I reacted emotionally to money. The way I thought about the future. Those things mattered far more than I realized. I remember getting one of my first significant pay increases. I was excited. Finally. More money. More freedom. More progress. At least that's what I expected. But something strange happened. A few months later, my financial situation looked almost identical. The extra money had disappeared. Not through one massive purchase. Not through a financial emergency. Through lifestyle inflation. Little upgrades. Slightly nicer choices. Slightly more spending. Slightly more convenience. Individually, nothing seemed dangerous. Collectively, they consumed the raise. That's when I learned an uncomfortable truth. Making more money is important. Keeping more money is transformative. Most people spend years learning how to earn. Very few spend time learning how to keep. And honestly, that difference changes everything. If I could start over, I'd learn this lesson immediately. Because money isn't only about numbers. It's about behavior. And behavior is heavily influenced by psychology. That's something most schools never teach. They teach mathematics. But not financial psychology. And financial psychology often determines financial outcomes. Think about it. How many people know they should save money, but don't? How many people understand debt is expensive, but continue borrowing? How many people know investing is important, but never start? The issue usually isn't information. The issue is behavior. And behavior is emotional. People spend when they're stressed. People spend when they're bored. People spend when they're trying to impress others. People spend when they're unhappy. Money and emotions are deeply connected, much more connected than many people realize. If I could sit down with my younger self, I'd explain this first. I'd say, before you learn how money grows, learn why you spend. Because understanding your behavior changes everything. For years, I thought my spending decisions were logical. But when I looked closely, many weren't logical at all. They were emotional. I bought things because I wanted temporary excitement. Temporary comfort. Temporary validation. The problem with temporary emotions is that they create permanent financial consequences. That's why awareness is so powerful. The moment you understand your behavior, you gain options. And options create better decisions. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I was younger was assuming small purchases didn't matter. After all, what difference could a few dollars make? A coffee here. A subscription there. A convenience purchase somewhere else. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extreme. But that's exactly what made it dangerous. Because financial damage rarely announces itself. It accumulates quietly. Tiny decisions repeated consistently become powerful outcomes. Good or bad. That's how habits work, and habits shape financial futures. I wish I had learned that earlier too. Because I spent years focusing on large decisions while ignoring small behaviors. The truth is, small behaviors often matter more. Not because they're individually important. Because they're repeated. Repetition creates momentum. And momentum shapes lives. The same principle works positively too. A small amount invested consistently. A small amount saved consistently. A small improvement repeated consistently. Over time, those actions become significant. That's the hidden power of compounding. Most people think compounding only applies to investments. It doesn't. Habits compound. Skills compound. Knowledge compounds. Confidence compounds. Everything compounds. And understanding compounding early would have changed my life. Because once you understand compounding, you stop chasing shortcuts. You start respecting consistency. That's another lesson I teach myself immediately. Consistency is more important than intensity. When I was younger, I loved dramatic plans, extreme budgets, aggressive goals, big changes. They felt productive, exciting, motivating, and they almost always failed. Not because the goals were impossible, because the approach wasn't sustainable. Eventually, motivation disappeared. Life became stressful. Unexpected expenses appeared. And the system collapsed. That's when I learned something valuable. Financial success isn't built on perfect months. It's built on consistent years. Years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. That changes your perspective. Because once you think in years, you stop obsessing over daily fluctuations. You stop panicking over temporary setbacks. You stop expecting overnight transformation. You become patient. And patience is incredibly valuable financially. Most financial mistakes happen because people are impatient. They want results immediately. Immediate wealth. Immediate success. Immediate freedom. But wealth rarely works that way. Real wealth often grows slowly. Very slowly. Then suddenly. The problem is, most people quit during the slow phase. The invisible phase. The phase where progress is happening but rewards aren't obvious yet. That's why patience becomes a competitive advantage. Patient people allow compounding enough time to work. And compounding rewards patience generously. If I could start over, I'd also learn the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Those words sound similar. But they're not the same. A person can earn a high income and still have very little wealth. A person can look successful and still be financially fragile. Wealth is not what people see. Wealth is what remains after spending. That's a lesson society rarely teaches. Society celebrates spending. New cars. Luxury items. Visible success. But real wealth is often invisible. It's savings. Investments. Ownership. Financial security. Things people can't easily see. Understanding that distinction earlier would have saved me from countless comparisons. Because comparison is expensive. Not only financially. Emotionally. You start spending money trying to keep up. Trying to fit in. Trying to project success. Meanwhile, actual financial progress slows down. That's one reason I believe money mindset matters so much. Your financial life reflects your thinking more than your income. Not completely, but significantly. How you think about spending. How you think about saving. How you think about the future. How you think about risk. Those beliefs influence every financial decision. And financial decisions compound over time. If I could start over, I'd focus less on looking successful. And more on becoming financially secure. Because security creates freedom. Freedom creates options. And options create a better life. One lesson took me years to learn. Financial freedom isn't about buying everything you want. It's about not needing everything you see. That realization changed my spending dramatically. Because marketing constantly encourages dissatisfaction. There's always something newer, better, faster, more impressive. And if you're not careful, you spend your entire life chasing upgrades. Upgrades rarely create lasting happiness, but they often delay financial freedom. That's why contentment is underrated. Contentment isn't about settling. It's about knowing when enough is enough. And honestly, that's one of the most valuable money lessons I've ever learned. If I could go back and start over, I'd learn that lesson immediately. Because contentment protects wealth, while constant comparison destroys it. Looking back now, the first thing I'd learn about money isn't investing. It isn't budgeting. It isn't taxes. It isn't credit scores. Those things matter. But they come later. First, I'd learn how behavior shapes outcomes. Because once behavior improves, everything else becomes easier. Saving becomes easier. Investing becomes easier. Planning becomes easier. Building wealth becomes easier. Behavior is the foundation. Everything else sits on top of it. And honestly, that's the lesson I wish someone had taught me earlier. Because money isn't just a financial subject. It's a human subject. A psychological subject. A behavioral subject. The people who master money often aren't the smartest. They're the most consistent. The most patient. The most intentional. And those qualities can be learned. That's the good news. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need a perfect income. You don't need perfect timing. You need awareness, discipline, patience, and time. Those simple things change lives. So if I could start over and learn one thing about money, it would be this: money amplifies behavior. Master the behavior, and the money becomes much easier to manage. Ignore the behavior, and no amount of money ever feels like enough. And honestly, that lesson alone would have saved me years of financial mistakes. So now I'm curious, if you could go back and teach your younger self one money lesson, what would it be? Comment below. And if you enjoyed videos about personal finance, money mindset, financial literacy, wealth building, and financial psychology, subscribe. Because sometimes the most important money lessons have very little to do with money itself.